House Democrats say Georgia Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is dangerous and are pushing to remove her from office. Congresswoman Greene is a supporter of the QAnon conspiracy theory and has been criticized for supporting social media posts that pushed for violence against Democratic leaders. And two of her Democratic colleagues are set to introduce a resolution next week to censure Greene as well as call for her resignation. One of those members is Congresswoman Sara of California. She joins me now from San Diego. Congresswoman Jacobs, thank you for joining us. In a statement, you write, quote, "Her presence in Congress is a threat to our democracy, our institutions, and the safety of every person who works in the Capitol." We know Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush is moving her office, claiming she was berated by Greene and targeted on social media. What most concerns you about Congresswoman Greene?
I think that we have seen the devastating effects that can happen when leaders use rhetoric that incites violence. I was in the House gallery on January 6th when the attack happened, and I think the fact that we have someone who is a member of Congress and has in the past advocated this kind of violence against our leaders and continues to really incite the kind of violence that we saw on January 6th makes all of us less safe. And I think it's incredibly important that we hold her accountable for those actions.
What exactly are you trying to hold her accountable for? Which specific comments or retweets are those that trouble you?
To me, there's a big difference between when she says things that I just don't agree with or that, I think are a little out there, and when she actively promotes, likes, and talks about committing violence against elected leaders. For instance, what she said about Speaker Pelosi, about Secretary Hillary Clinton. To me, those actions, the likes, the retweets, the shares, her comments on it are really what is most troubling to me.
You mentioned being in Congress during the attack on the Capitol. Aside from that, have you personally received any threats?
As a young woman who is public facing, I'm sure you're unsurprised to know that I've gotten my fair share of very horrible things said to me, about me, threats made against my office and myself, even prior to January 6th. But I think it's important that we don't let these kinds of threats and fear dictate what we do, that we stay focused on the job at hand and we don't let an angry mob determine what we're going to do as elected leaders.
Congresswoman Greene says that this is all part of cancel culture. I'm wondering if you expect your resolution calling for her to be censured to have any support among Republican colleagues.
I have a number of Republican colleagues I've spoken to who are equally horrified by the comments and the actions of Congresswoman Greene, and I'm hopeful that when it comes time to vote, they will do the right thing.
What do you think censuring her will actually accomplish?
Well, the resolution calls to censure her and also calls for her resignation. I think that is an important component because we know having her in there, having her have that kind of leadership role can incite violence. We've already seen something like that happen. But I also think it sets the marker that this is not acceptable behavior. This is not an acceptable way of sharing your differences in opinions, and that it really shows that there is a range of disagreements we can have that are legitimate policy disagreements, but then there are some things that are beyond the pale, and that advocating for violence against our elected leaders is one of those things.
One of the other things that other members have discussed is her engaging in conspiracy theories. I mentioned QAnon. She's also suggested that several of the mass shootings, particularly school shootings, were false flags, that they never happened. As a result, some of the parents of those deceased children have called for her to be stripped from her position on the House Education and Labor Committee. If your efforts to have her censured and removed from office fail, would you look at that as the next backup?
I absolutely support efforts to get her off of her committees, including and especially the Committee on Education. I think her comments around school shootings are absolutely horrific. I can't tell you how many young people I've talked to in my district who are terrified of going to school every single day before the pandemic. Parents who are terrified of sending their kids to school. I've looked in kids' eyes who have feared for their lives. I myself am a millennial who had a number of threats and had to do all of the kinds of school shooting preparedness that we know kids are doing still now. And, I think that this is a very real problem that we have in this country, and we need to address it. And we need to make sure that people understand that it's real and understand the trauma that we're putting a generation of kids through.
One last question for you, Congresswoman Jacobs. I've been watching as Congresswoman Greene has been tweeting about the mob that she feels is coming after her, about the cancel culture, and she says that she has raised $1.6 million from 60,000 Americans in all 50 states as a result of efforts like yours to censure her. Are you concerned that this push might backfire and either incite more vitriol or potential violence from her supporters, or allow her to continue to increase her platform and receive more attentive eyes on her conspiracy theories?
In my experience working in post-conflict settings, in post-coup transitions, accountability like this is incredibly important. And I think making sure that we hold her accountable is an important first step in moving our country forward. And so I'm not worried about that. I think this accountability is important. And it's important to make sure that we make this distinction between appropriate differences of opinion and this kind of behavior that really crosses a line outside of that, and that we hold her accountable. It's why I'm working with my colleague, Congresswoman Nikema Williams of Georgia, and the Georgia delegation on this resolution, because we know how important it is for all of us, but especially for folks living in her state, to make sure that she is no longer a threat to our country and our safety.
Congresswoman Sara Jacobs, thank you. CBSN reached out to Congresswoman Greene for comment. She says in part, quote, "They are coming after me because they know I represent the people, not the politicians. They're coming after me because, like President Trump, I will always defend America First values. They want to take me out because I represent the people and they absolutely hate it."